Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Pune International Center program. This is very interesting paper that we're going to talk about today. But you're going to hear a lot more of it from the experts that you see on the dais today. So I'll keep it very simple. For those of you who are not members of the Pune International Center or haven't attended earlier programs, a very brief introduction to the Pune International Center. We are a think tank that has a lot of focus on discussions, deliberations, producing policy, public policy research papers, and from a neutral platform, influencing public policy makers. That's what PIC focuses on. It's been 7.5 years for us. More than 120 programs, more than 20 public policy research papers and briefs. We have, many of you here are members of the Pune International Center. There are little more than 400 of us now. We also have 50 institutes of international repute that are institutional members of Pune International Center. That includes many universities in Pune. That includes Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, many reputed institutions in Delhi, and one or two of those also in Canada and other places. That's Pune International Center. As I mentioned, we do take a lot of pride in the public policy research that we do. Today we have gathered to talk about a paper on list in India. What I'm going to do to begin with is I'll request Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who doesn't need much of an introduction, so I'll not introduce him. Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Padma Vibhushan, Vice President of Pune International Center. I'll request Dr. Kelkar to introduce the chairperson and speaker as well as the idea behind the policy paper. So,
Dr. Narendra Yadav and friends, it's really my distinct pleasure to introduce our chief guest today, who is also actually, he has two hats. He is today our chief guest, but is also trustee of PIC. The reason I call him chief guest because the topic on which this policy paper has been written, he has been agitating about related areas in Parliament in the last few months. So I thought it was only appropriate that this paper, policy paper, is released by him as a PIC's policy paper. I don't want to, Umesh will, who the author is here, he'll explain the paper. As you know, Dr. Yadav is the Honorable Member of Parliament. He is a member of Rajya Sabha. He is one of a distinguished economists. He worked in Reserve Bank of India. He worked in IMF. He was advisor to President of Afghanistan. He was Vice Chancellor of Pune University. He was a member of the Planning Commission. So he has done policy making for the last several years, and now he is in the Parliament. He is a member of the Standing Committee on Finance. So it's only appropriate that we have him to release this paper. Usually, as usual, in this preparing this policy paper, we took the approach of consultation to widest possible stakeholders before we write a policy. So Umesh first wrote a draft paper. It was discussed it was circulated to people who are knowledgeable in this area, from investment banking community, from people who are involved with investment area regulation, especially market regulation. And we held a consultative meeting in Mumbai in National Stock Exchange, National Stock Exchange Institute, our member. It was chaired by Deepak Parekh, and we had everybody who is somebody in Bombay in this field, including, I may say, that regulators. SEBI also was there. There were 3 hours meeting, in which lots of points were made, and you will find in the paper that discussed extensively by Umesh, and he took on some of the ideas, some of the he didn't take, and he explained why he didn't accept them. So it's a well researched and plus well discussed paper amongst the experts. So what final paper is there has, I think, a tremendous, if I may say, power and the merit. So let me first request Dr. Jadhav to release the paper, and then I'll request and hand over the meeting to him to take this evening further.
Thank you, sir, for a very generous introduction. Well, friends, at the very outset, I welcome you all for a discussion on a very, very interesting policy paper by Shri Kudalkar. And we'll start by a presentation by Mr. Umesh Kudalkar, who is CFA and a member of PIC. And he has, as Dr. Kelkar explained, he not only authored the paper, he piloted that in the expert group meeting in Mumbai, and he has revised that paper, and in the final shape, the paper is now, has been now released. So he will make a presentation for about 25 minutes, and presentation would be followed by Q&A. So please write down your questions on a piece of paper. That would be, are we going to give it to them? So without any further ado, may I now request Sri Umesh Kudalkar to make his presentation. Umesh Kudalkar.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Jadhav, Dr. Kelkar, Mr. Girbane, PIC staff and my multi-act colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen, I thank all of you for being present here, and you have been so generous with your time, and I am grateful for the same. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Kelkar publicly. Without his mentoring and guidance, this paper would not have been possible. The acknowledgement page of the paper simply thanks Dr. Kelkar for his guidance. However, that statement doesn't truly capture his precious contribution. Just to give you an example, he shared his idea of linking the mechanism of listing to a topic of much broader appeal, which is foreign direct investment. Additionally, Dr. Kelkar had a tough task at hand. That is to motivate a Konkani person like me, and that too, a content and a chakram malvani, for an academic endeavor. In a 2007 article, Economic Times described Dr. Kelkar as an economist with a heart of gold. It was my privilege to experience this firsthand during the writing of this paper. And trust me, without Dr. Kelkar's encouragement, critique, suggestions and guidance, I would never have completed this paper. Now we are very fortunate to have an economist turned politician, Dr. Jadhav, who kindly agreed to chair this session. Dr. Jadhav, as all of you know, is foremost a scholar, ex-Vice Chancellor of the Savitribai Phule Pune University, and now an esteemed member of the Rajya Sabha. He has been an author or editor of more than 36 books and several articles that span more than 10,000 pages. It is an honor to have him with us here today. Dr. Jadhav's book, Amcha Baap and Amhi, has sold more than 6 lakh copies and translated into more than 17 languages. In his book, there is an interesting incident which I would like to quote. Once his father appealed to him that since he is so well qualified with a PhD from the US, why doesn't he join politics and serve people rather than working for a bank? I am sure that his father Dada would have been very happy to see Dr. Jadhav in politics. Last but not the least, I thank Dinesh, Sachin, Aniruddha, Jyoti, and so many others whose names I am not mentioning here due to paucity of time. They were all responsible for enriching the content of this paper. And I am truly indebted to PIC for this opportunity and staff for the organization of this event. Now, I begin my presentation. List in India enabling Indian ownership of MNCs that are ubiquitous in our lives. Now, this slide depicts an average day in our lives. We wake up in the morning with an alarm in our Apple or Samsung phones. Then for breakfast, we may have poha or upma, but our next generation also eats Kellogg's breakfast cereals. Then it is time for social media updates and we check WhatsApp messages and Facebook posts. Our leaders go on their Twitter account and start their day. We commute to our offices in Honda, Hyundai, Toyota and other cars. And we go to office and work on computers. We use products by Intel, Dell, we work on Microsoft products, Word and Excel, and I am presenting here today using Microsoft PowerPoint. Later in the evening, we go home and spend time with family. We may watch Netflix on Samsung or Sony televisions. As you can see, MNCs have been all pervasive in our lives. Not an hour goes by where we don't interact with an MNC product. Unfortunately, currently, while Indians are flocking to buy goods and services of MNCs, such as Facebook, Samsung or Toyota, these MNCs are enjoying India market access without listing. For Facebook, we are the product. Facebook sells our attention to earn advertising dollars. Millions of Indians contribute to Facebook's market cap of $500 billion. Just to put these numbers in perspective, Samsung's revenue in 2015 and 16 exceeded the education outlay of India in 2017. Toyota sold more than 97,000 Innova and Fortuner with around 20,000 crore turnover in FY 2017. While Indian consumers are buying these products and services and contributing to the profits, unlisted MNCs are taking 100% of these profits, 100% of these profits to their home countries. And Indian customers and investors are unable to participate in the wealth that is getting created because of them. This was not always the case though. Back then in 1978, Janata government came with a diktat that MNC parents must dilute their shareholding to 40%. Indian citizens benefited immensely because of this decision. For example, Colgate listing provided annual returns of 24% plus dividends over the last 40 years. Rupees 10,000 invested in 1978 multiplied 7,100 times to rupees 7.1 crore today. Most recently, another multinational company, Maruti Suzuki, provided returns of 30% plus dividends over the last 15 years. A good quality listed MNC is a path to prosperity as seen from countless examples. Now let us see what is the situation today. Sadly, we have 0% participation in the major companies that shape up the world today. The market cap of just these top 20 internet companies, including Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Apple, is at $6 trillion, which is 3 times that of the NSE listed companies. This really hurts. Here is a list of famous Indian internet companies with major Chinese investment. Paytm, Big Basket, Ola, Make My Trip, Hike, Practo, Gaana, Newsdog, ShareChat, Zoomcar. All of these are household names. They are deeply embedded in our lives. I am sure all of us have some, if not all of these apps in the mobile phone today. This is in fact Chinese takeover of our startup ecosystem. How did this situation arise in the first place? Let's see how. Zealous pursuit of FDI to bridge the trade deficit resulted in India giving up profits and strategic advantage that was order of magnitude more than what we received. Profits accrue to parent companies, not in India. Now let us compare Hindustan Unilever versus unlisted companies Danone and Cadbury. In India, MNCs repatriate profits and royalty that are many times their India investment. Had HUL not been listed in the past 5 years, it would have repatriated 15,830 crores, that is 5.6 times its investment in India through internal accruals. Due to listing, Indian shareholders got at least rupees 3,300 crores of dividends, that are 21% of 15,830 crores. Incidentally, Hindustan Unilever FDI may have happened decades ago. As against HUL, Danone and Cadbury Mondelez, they aren't listed. Therefore, their Indian consumers don't hold any equity and don't get any share in their profits. We continued with our FDI policies even as the world has undergone a regime change with the emergence of internet MNCs, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and others that are based on winner-takes-all platform business models. This makes it impossible to have a competing operating system or a search engine startup in India. Web services markets are permanently ceded to internet MNCs, so much so that ironically some government data now resides on Amazon Web Services. Indian citizens don't own any equity in any of these winner-takes-all MNCs. India currently does not have the ability to exert any influence on these MNCs because she has not developed any alternatives like China. What is critical to understand is that all of these new age businesses are based on strategically important intellectual property. Internet MNCs operating in India track citizens' profiles, relationships, likes, dislikes, location, consumption and activity, and then sell this valuable analytics from this data to advertisers to earn revenue. This is in fact colonization with a new avatar. As Nandan Nilekani said, we are subject to data colonization. Now, does this sound familiar? Have we been through this before? Certainly yes. Deja vu. This is similar to the East India Company. History tends to repeat itself, and Sachin Bansal of Flipkart calls this British East India Company era as FDI 1.0. They used Indian resources such as cotton. Indian farmers and workers got jobs just like today we work for MNCs. And they sold the finished product back to us. But the profits earned were repatriated to UK. Indians did not have a share in their profits. While today's age may seem different, it is more of the same what it was 200 years ago. Under the guise of free market and shiny toys, we are selling off equity to make hay today. Everyone is happy that social media and shopping apps are making our lives easier. But do we realize that none of us have any share in the wealth that is being generated because of us? So while the masters have changed, the subjects have remained the same. Do we have any other countries facing similar issue? Or is it just that Indians who get greedy when it comes to seeking equity ownership? In fact, I would say that the issue of protecting national interest is global. Every nation in the world protects its economic interests vis-à-vis MNCs. Globally, many countries have laws in place to prevent such issues. The United States of America protects its national interests by way of trade wars. US has been very strategic in selectively blocking Alibaba and Tencent when they tried to acquire some US companies. The Committee of Foreign Investment in the US, which is similar to our FIPB, CFI US, subjects any foreign investment, including non-controlling ones, in 27 industries to the stricter review process. It applies if the investment would result in a board seat, any decision-making power, or the disclosure of non-public information about a company. Gulf countries require local nationals to be taken as business partners. Then in Australia, its treasurer threatened criminal action if BHP Billiton Limited, which is one of the largest mining companies, moved their share market listing to UK. Stock market listing is an issue of national pride and sentiment, and delisting initiative is seen as acting against national interest. Incidentally, BHP Billiton is traded in 4 exchanges: ASX, LSE, NYSE and JSE. Then in UK, Unilever scrapped its plan to delist from UK market following outcry from investors. Even Germany is extremely protective. It tried to prevent indigenous robotics firm KUKA's takeover by Chinese firm Media. It raised fears about Germany's most advanced technology ending up in Chinese hands. Germany, in fact, has expanded powers to block takeovers in view of concerns over the scale of Chinese deal making in the country's high-tech sector. Now, let us talk about China. China takes extreme steps to protect its interests. It allows market access only upon technology transfer and mandatory 50-50 JVs. In fact, Boeing and General Electric have ended up transferring their jet navigation technology to China. China simply bans and creates local alternatives to internet MNCs. For example, here is a list of MNCs that are banned by China: Google, Amazon, Facebook, WhatsApp and Twitter. Everything is banned in China. And they have promoted local companies like Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, WeChat and Sinabibo. Here is another list of global companies banned in China. YouTube is banned in China, Quora, Expedia, Uber, everything is banned in China. And they promoted companies, local companies like Youku, Zhihu, Ctrip and Didi Chuxing. Therefore, we now stand at a historic juncture where our decisions will affect the future of India. We now have 3 options. First is to remain jaise the and let everything continue as it is. The systematic wealth drain continues and India may repeat its history all over again after 250 years. Second option is to follow China and ban all MNCs while creating local alternatives. While China has been immensely successful in this, when we tried this option in the past, it fostered crony capitalism. In our democracy, this banning option may not be feasible. More importantly, the upsides of FDI are obvious. They are substantial and broad. For example, FDI enables technology, supply chain, processes, markets, brands, management. Bhavish Agarwal of Ola, he worked at Microsoft. More strategically, foreign companies invested in India create a vested interest for India overseas with access to politicians, academia, press, etc. in their host country. In fact, this is India's soft power. So, FDI 2, above all, must do no harm. This brings us to the third option, which is list or trade in India to segue into FDI 2 to enable Indian public participation in the equity of MNCs. Now let us review some of the benefits of List in India strategic policy initiative. First, retail investors, mutual funds and pension funds will be able to buy stocks from an expanded universe of quality stocks. With demonetization and financialization of India, retail investors have begun investing in equity mutual funds, and List in India is a perfect solution for investing this increased inflow in equity markets. Next, this investment gains will be very widely distributed across the nation. Then we will have vibrant capital markets. List in India would result in an estimated 33% increase in Indian listed market cap. Financial services is one of the biggest employers in the country, and list in India will increase job opportunities multifold. In recent interviews, few industry doyens have expressed concern that India has very few companies to invest in, and money is coming through a very broad funnel and is going into a very narrow pie. This is driving the stock market valuations to an unreasonably high levels. Increased variety of good investments will ensure affordability in the equity markets. And the last and the most important benefit is global diversification. During the period December 2007 to 17, that is a 10-year period, global equity returns were at least 5 percentage points per annum higher than Indian equity returns over a 3-year, 5-year and a 10-year period. Now, continuing with the same theme of diversification benefit to Indian investors in a couple of more slides, in India we consider Nifty 50 to be the representative index of the large cap stocks. If we see the sectoral distribution of Nifty 50, two things immediately stand out. First, only two sectors, that is financial services and energy, they contribute to more than 50% weight in the index. And second, and even worse, we continue to be an economy excessively dominated by the ancient business of money lending, almost 38% weight, rather than futuristic businesses in machine learning or artificial intelligence and others. So, we have a non-strategic asset allocation with higher weightage to archaic sectors. On the other hand, let us look at S&P 500, the large cap index of the US. In contrast to the previous chart, we can see that instead of two sectors, four sectors form 50% of the market cap, and the weights of smaller sectors, they aren't negligible. More importantly, three of the four sectors, that is information technology, healthcare, communication services, they are based on cutting edge futuristic technology. Even the financial services in the US is undergoing a fintech revolution with blockchain and robo-advisory companies such as Wealthfront, Betterment and discount brokers like Robinhood. Any money manager will tell you that it is the asset allocation that dictates the returns on an investment. So where should an investor be invested in? In sunset sectors or sunrise industries that are creating the future? As the Sahu Committee report says, households and firms in India deserve access to world-class financial services. They must not be hostage to the infirmities, if any, of the Indian financial system. Now that we have seen the benefits of diversification, I present the two listing proposals that would enable diversification through equity participation in MNCs. So here is proposal 1, list MNC subsidiaries in India. Fortunately, in 1978, Janata Government Diktat shows us the way. We simply need to reintroduce that policy of listing MNC subsidiaries in India to achieve the goals of FDI 2, of sharing the equity ownership of MNCs with Indian citizens. And this can be done using tax incentives on the lines of Bangladesh and a few other countries. In fact, in Bangladesh, Berger Paints and Marico are listed because of tax incentives. MNCs where the foreign parent holds more than 51% equity and are listed in India should be eligible to domestic company tax rate, whereas MNCs where the foreign parent holds more than 51% equity but are not listed in India should be subject to suitably higher tax rate. That's the proposal. Now proposal 2. Proposal 2 is trade in India by integrating Indian stock markets with global bourses. Not only the MNC's Indian subsidiaries should be listed using tax incentives, we should also follow the example of Mexico and China and integrate our stock market systems with the global exchanges so that Indian citizens can buy parent MNC shares in dollars in India. MNCs would readily agree to this proposal as it does not involve issue of new shares for listing in India. Also, MNCs need not comply with the listing norms in India. We could enable trading of S&P 500 stocks to begin with. Incidentally, 35th ranked Nifty stock has a market cap equivalent to 500th ranked S&P 500 stock. Thus, S&P 500 stocks are much larger, high-quality investment opportunities. We should allow mutual funds like Vanguard to offer ultra-low cost, about 4 basis points S&P 500 index funds such as Admiral shares using Indian eKYC. According to me, dual listing will face a lot of resistance from MNCs because of cost of compliance and burden of dual regulatory supervision, challenges in aligning takeover code, insider trading rules, minimum public float and voting rights of shareholders in India vis-a-vis foreign shareholders. And therefore, I am suggesting Trade in India, which will be a frictionless proposal that can be easily implemented. Now, listing of MNCs is in the true spirit of give and take. It is a positive sum game because all stakeholders gain. While Indian consumers contribute to MNC profits, with the equity ownership of MNCs, mutual funds and pension funds will gain, and those gains will be widely distributed, resulting in prosperity and capital formation. This would create a virtuous cycle of innovative ideas, entrepreneurship, employment, consumption, higher taxes, social and physical infrastructure for the benefit of Indian society. In fact, one could ask, can we afford not to list MNCs in India? In fact, this is the essence of this paper. So here we are at the end of the presentation. Here are some key takeaways from this presentation. A free market access should be a two-way street, benefiting both the MNC and the country. Every country tries to balance this wealth transfer. Countries like China take extreme measures to protect their sovereignty. In India, most MNCs have wholly owned subsidiaries, and MNCs repatriate profits and royalty that are many times their India investment. This is resulting in a wealth drain similar to the British era. MNCs are ruling Indian lives, shaping our opinions, votes, and may even be influencing the election of our leaders. So, we must own equity in the top MNCs. Intellectual property and equity asset ownership are key to wealth creation. Prime Minister Modi initiated the movement Make in India to encourage companies to manufacture their products in India and also increase their investment. It is the need of the hour that we claim our right to the equity ownership through List in India to make the dream of wealthy India a reality. You have been a wonderful audience, and I am honored that I got this opportunity to present this idea of List in India to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Umeshji, for a very brilliant presentation. It was an eye-opener indeed. The floor is now open for Q&A. Umeshji, would you mind, instead of taking one question at a time, shall we put them in groups? We have
Whatever
a
you
group
say,
of
sir.
5.
And please don't call me Umeshji. I am Umesh, and I am
Okay.
extremely
All right.
very junior to you, and very honored to have
Thank
you
you.
as the chair.
Yeah. So you may want to jot down the questions.
Yeah.
we can take 5 at a time. So, because let's not get stuck on the particular question, giving disproportionately more time.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, please shoot your questions. My suggestion is that please introduce yourself very briefly and ask your question very precisely. No speech, please. We want questions, not a speech, and we have about 30 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you, sir, for taking the question. My question is to you. What would it take for the Parliament to move on this proposal, and how long would it take?
Okay. Yeah. Further questions?
It's okay. On the left, please. Yeah. So you'll have to stand up and just say aloud.
My question was, companies list in the market to raise funds.
Does yeah hello yeah companies typically list on market to raise funds. Does the Indian market have enough liquidity to fund foreign companies?
Just wanted to ask whether it's a matter of competence, because listing is something which putting the cart before the horse. If we were really competent, couldn't we have made all these products ourselves? Tata was making steel for 100 years, well before the Chinese. We had all these Bangalore big boys who had a lot of money in the bank and couldn't come up with any of these products when Facebook, Google were dormitory, compilations and papers. So is it as a nation we are not investing, or we are not competent enough? Because if we were, we would have made these products. If the Chinese have been able to block, is because they are able to make the clones of these things, however bad or good they are. So is FERA 2.0 the answer, or is something more holistic and more directed? Competency development seems to be a big problem, because we cannot even take a large share of the clothing market, where we are the world's largest cotton producer and so on and so forth. So I didn't want to make a speech, just wanted to ask the experts here.
Outstanding question. Yeah. Further questions,
Yeah.
please.
So just it was a brilliant presentation, sir. I just wanted to ask whether you have made this presentation to Mr. Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, or Mr. Suresh Prabhu, the industries minister, or then you'll have to wait for a couple of months for the next government.
No, I haven't done anything yet.
Sir, my question is, in your second proposal, which is trade in India, you mentioned that we should allow S&P 500 stocks, right? If I'm not wrong, if I've understood it right, S&P 500 stocks that have significant Indian consumer base, or all S&P 500 stocks.
Okay.
Question for Mr. Kudalkar. I am Vikas Deshmukh, PIC member.
Hello.
In your proposal 2, which is trade in India, one of the concerns that companies have are the onerous regulations in our exchanges. Have you considered an option of setting up a separate exchange which will only be trading shares of MNCs, where the regulations will be much less, and perhaps initially we could allow only the mutual funds and qualified investors to invest, and then learn from that experience?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. You want to take more, or
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Yes. Umesh, please.
Yeah. So there was this question about whether there is enough liquidity to absorb the MNC listing. So I have thought about this. The total market cap that may get added because of MNC subsidiaries that will get listed is about 50 lakh crores. Okay, and we have a provision for 25% to be public float. Okay, that makes it about 11 lakh crores. If you look at the FY18 total investment in the equity markets in India, okay, there are three main sources. One is foreign portfolio investment, which was about 1.77 lakh crores. Then there was LIC, and there was domestic mutual funds. Okay, the total amount was about 4.5 lakh crores. So we cannot do this in one go. We have to do it in a phased manner. We say 10% to be listed in year 1, 10% in year 2, and 10% in year 3. Moreover, what I wish to say is, today, for lack of opportunities, most of the money is getting into real estate. If tomorrow Microsoft and Google and Toyota are being available on the Indian stock market, this 4.5 lakh crores that we are seeing today can suddenly expand even threefold, and we can absorb that money flow in 1 year. That's my guess. Okay, because there are not enough good companies, people are not putting in money. That's one of the assumptions that I have. The next is about the competence, on which I wouldn't comment. I will answer that. Perhaps I would, Dr. Jadhav might like to perhaps answer that question later. Because that competence, whether we have or not, it is a fact that we have not made those products. My idea is, if we can't beat them, join them. Okay. So if we can't be Google and Facebook, at least participate in the shareholding of those companies. If we can't find an alternative, right? Then about the S&P 500 question, what I'm saying is we should make the S&P 500 stocks available for Indian investors. Whether Indian investors buy some of those which are not there in India or not, whether that name recall or mind share is there or not, is entirely left to the market. So we are not forcing, in a stock market investment, you are not forcing anybody to buy. You just offer it. If people take it, that's fine. I mean, if the name is familiar, people will buy. If the name is not familiar, people will not buy. Okay. So I would leave it to the market. Then as far as the question about the trade in India thing is concerned, none of these companies will be subjected to Indian regulator at all, because they are just providing a trading window, and in fact they will only be answerable to Securities and Exchange Commission. We are just buying those shares, and we are also being bound by SEC. So Indian regulation has got nothing to do with this. It is just a electronic trading facility that is available on the National Stock Exchange for buying some of these shares. In fact, there is a problem here which I think is a big opportunity as well for the government of India. And the problem here is in terms of taxation. United States imposes estate tax above $60,000, very low limit of $60,000 to the extent of 40%. Okay. Now, because this is a problem, the solution in fact is much better for the Indian government, because I am suggesting a solution that will have a trust. Okay. The government trust, which will buy these shares, and the government gets the voting rights. Okay. And we as citizens place orders for Google :IND, which is an Indian version of that, 10 shares. It gets automatically translated by the NSDL trust into 10 Google shares. The shares come into the account of the government, okay, and the government passes on the capital gains and the dividends to the retail investor. I give up my voting right as a retail investor or a mutual fund. The government of India gets one voting right on behalf of all the citizens of India. One more advantage of this situation is that if there is a litigation, suppose some Charles Schwab or some such broker, there is some settlement problem, okay, it is the entire faith of the government of India, sovereign, that will fight that particular issue. So individually you need not go and fight that case.
Yeah, please.
Good evening. My name is Vikram Bapat. I'm a member of PIC. My question to you, Mr. Kudalkar, excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What is the trigger for listing? Is it any transaction? Is it business? Is there a threshold for a trigger to make a company list in India?
Yeah, more questions, please. In the second round, yeah, please.
So,
Arun,
yeah, thank you for this presentation.
identify yourself and.
Yeah, so I'm Arun Mantri. I recently relocated to Pune, my hometown, after spending about 35 years in World Bank and IMF. And I know everybody here, including Umesh, who has shared this paper with me. I have a question related to the second proposal, which is, the part where you say that you should have access to S&P and so on. What I'm surprised is that there is a facility by which Indian investor can, through portfolio management scheme, invest. And what I found from my own kind of very limited interaction is people are not interested because they say the Indian stock market is doing so well. So there seems to be some kind of resistance. The second part is what you mentioned related to the estate taxes. In fact, the estate taxes are only applicable if you have US situs assets. So if you're in actually US fixed income, there is no barrier. In fact, they will not be treated as US assets. And so if you put money in US fixed income, which I do, you actually incur no estate things. So that's number one. The second part is related to your first proposal, which is the listing part. See, to me, listing is just a method of exchange. So I really don't feel that's what you're really talking about. Is you want ownership. You want basically a piece of the profits. And so whatever policy change that needs to be done, I think should be focused not so much on the listing part, but how do Indians participate in ownership so that you get your profits. So how would you address that?
Question for you. After him, you.
This is a follow-on to what he was mentioning, because today you already have mutual funds and a
Please identify yourself.
Sorry, my name is Raghunath Iyer, and I am a technologist, and I am a CTO at US MNC. So much as I would like Indian products, we have not been successful. So taking off further from what he said, Arun said, we already have avenues by which Indian retail investors can invest in MNC shares. There are mutual funds and there are exchange traded funds. So why is it that those cannot be tweaked to fulfill a similar objective if it is ownership that we are trying to address?
Question for you.
I'm Shripad Mirashi. I'm PIC member. Just now we discussed the point that we do not have competence to create companies to compete Google and so many others. It has been a history that in Japan or even in India, when the private sector cannot do anything, the government has stepped in. For example, India has done wonderful things in ISRO and atomic energy. So is it very difficult for the Indian government to compete Google or any other companies?
My name is Prashant. I have got a question for Umesh sir. Rather, I have a question for the panel. Can you just elaborate a little bit on how either of the two proposals will actually bring in FDI? Because if you see, the shares are being issued by the MNC in either case, and even in case of proposal 2, the initial sale is being done by a buyer, a holder of the shares who is sitting outside India. So we see a foreign outflow of our currency rather than an inflow. Though we do get the benefit of the profits that are being generated by the companies. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first question was about what is the trigger to list in India. Okay. Now, for the MNCs, there is no trigger. Okay. But for us, there is a trigger. That's how I would put it. In the sense, if in 1978 the government said the dilution of MNCs should dilute up to 40% of equity, and that decision immensely benefited us. So what I am saying is that particular decision somehow was forgotten, okay, and later on the 100% subsidiaries of MNCs were formed. So much so that many of these subsidiaries, they compete with the listed companies. For example, you will have a MNC listed which is selling particular set of products, and then there is 100% subsidiary which is selling value added products, and slowly and steadily these old products will get phased out, and the listed company there will hardly anything remain in that company, and only the 100% entity will take it over. So this is some of the triggers that I find that we should enable this listing or participation mechanism. The next question is about the fixed income and the interactive brokers. Now, these proposals have got, they are not talking about fixed income investment at all, because I don't believe that any Indian would be so much enthusiastic about holding US Treasury bonds or any of these things. I'm not too sure. Okay, these proposals are essentially all about equity, and in fact, about this estate tax thing, there was a lot of exchange that happened with me and several US lawyers, including Arun. Okay, and the final conclusion was for a foreign citizen like us, okay, the estate tax do apply. I have seen the KPMG reports, the E&Y reports, and I have given the references of all of those in my paper. And anybody who is interested can go through it in greater detail. I have also consulted several lawyers in Mumbai, and then we have come up with this proposal for creating a trust. So that answers the and then I need to answer the interactive broker question. See, there is a firm known as Interactive Brokers, which is based in which has a listing in Nasdaq, and in Andheri they have an office, and through them we can buy shares of US companies. That is what is being told. Now, if you look at the SEBI report that came out on 4th of December 2018, that report somehow says that under the current FEMA, Indians cannot hold equity, foreign equity at all, and it is illegal. That came as a shock to me as well, but they have very clearly worded it that way in chapter 3. Okay. One more thing is, in interactive brokers, there are 3 problems. Number 1, there is something known as omnibus model which they adopt, which means the shares are held in the interactive broker's name. For example, if Umesh wants to buy, say, Google, okay, the shares remain in the broker's name, and therefore I am taking the credit risk of the broker. If interactive broker goes bankrupt, okay, then SIPC is supposed to reimburse $500,000 for that default. But I am not too sure whether as an Indian citizen SIPC will give me $500,000. Okay. Next problem is in the income tax, in the Indian Income Tax Act, what do I tell the income tax officer? The shares are not in my name. Am I eligible for capital gains? Not. Definitely they will charge it at maximum tax rate because the shares are not in my name. Okay, it is in the broker's name. The third thing is, in case of estate tax, because the US authorities can influence the broker directly, if you submit a death certificate, okay, the US government by law, the broker will deduct 40% and give the remaining back to your next of kin. Okay, so the US government can, it controls that US broker because the shares are first of all not in your name at all. Okay. Fourth thing, taxation is already covered. So these are the 3 points where I think the interactive brokers thing is not going to work. Okay. Main thing is the SEBI says it is illegal. That is the ab initio null and void. Then is it difficult for government of India to create or build startups to compete with Google? I am not competent to answer this question, but I think it's an uphill task. Basically, you need to understand there is something known as platform business models. Okay, this is a term that is newly coined. Okay, and that platform business model means winner takes all. Period. Okay. For example, today we have Microsoft Windows on all desktops and laptops. Do we have an alternate operating system? The answer is no. Do we have a search engine other than Google that we search? Bing is there, but I think none of us search Bing, right? Third, if you look at Facebook, Facebook is the de facto social networking site for the entire world, forget India. And in fact, Facebook oversees a population of more than 1.5 billion, which is even larger than China. Okay? So these are giants and these are like winner takes all, and most of the platform businesses are of this nature. The number 2 or number 3 stands no chance, and therefore we cannot have an alternative operating system, we cannot have an alternative search engine, and we cannot have an alternative social media company. Period. Okay. So I don't think that is going to happen. Now about Prashant's question about FDI 2. Now when I am saying FDI 2, I am not talking about getting FDI in at all. I am saying that you need to transform the existing FDI so that the FDI 2 becomes more harmonious in the way that we are allowed to take equity the other way around. So in fact, there will be a foreign exchange outgo. And what I am saying is, this kind of foreign exchange outgo should be treated as a qualitative use of foreign exchange. Because if you are spending foreign exchange on vacation, it just evaporates in thin air, right? The money is lost. But when you are buying shares of Google or any of these S&P 500 companies, in fact, it is likely that the money will appreciate. In fact, I have a detailed study from 1991. If we had done SIP, the Government Sovereign Wealth Fund, if they created a sovereign wealth fund in 1991 and invested only 10% of the foreign exchange reserves, okay, in a monthly SIP, in S&P 500 index fund, admiral fund like Vanguard, then our foreign exchange reserves today would have been double of what they are today. I can prove it to you in an Excel spreadsheet, okay. And even if you start, you take any beginning year, 91, 92, 93, right up to 2007. I have even calculated the drawdown of foreign exchange, and the maximum drawdown period has been about 21 months, okay. And that maximum drawdown was not more than 15% of forex. So you have a very good relationship between the upside versus downside ratio. Yeah. Any other questions?
Couple of more questions. Yeah, please.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, please.
About the trading in India, second proposal.
Identify yourself.
Sorry, I'm Nikhil Soman. I work as a reinsurance broker.
Okay.
So the observation is Dubai has done similar experiment. They have a Nasdaq Dubai, and one of the reasons why it has become quite successful is it's a tax haven status of Dubai and sovereign wealth funds. Sovereign wealth funds you already mentioned, and maybe the tax haven status would be addressed by the gift city kind of similar reason. So you may consider this model of Dubai as well.
One more question. Yeah, please. Can that be final question?
Okay, sure.
Hi, I'm Praveen Chaudhary. Sir, I totally appreciate the efforts which you've taken in bringing it. And the slide of yours where you showed the East India Company. The East India Company, handing over a paper, that pictorial. So my query arises at two places now. One is when we're talking about list in India, that is when we should have the ownership of the spends what I do and what the earnings you generate from my country. Secondly, my another query, second part of it is the Snapdeals and the Flipkarts. My gems are being sold to the outside countries, outside world like Walmarts and the soft banks. So what do we do about this outflow, which has been created within, rather than competing with others like creating another Google? But I have my own Snapdeal and my Mintras of the world and Paytms of the world, which are being controlled by soft banks and Walmarts of the world. So again, we are going to fight back with them. Give me the ownership. So that is my query.
Okay. I will take the tax haven question. Yeah.
Yeah, hello sir. My name is Adnan. I just wanted to know a bit more about your list in India thing. Is it also going to help us in creating the ecosystem for new companies to come in, maybe new know-how to come in? See, because this is linked to the competence question. Competence cannot be made overnight. So is it also going to help there?
Okay. I'll take the first question, the tax haven part. First of all, I am not suggesting any tax incentives. Whatever is the 10% capital gains tax is there, that is fine and it should stay. So there is no such, proposal in my, paper. Okay. The next question is about the private companies. Unfortunately, there is no remedy to that, because if these Olas and Flipkarts are going to be owned by private investors, and they have the money like SoftBank, they are putting in billions of dollars in making some of these companies, owning these companies. Okay, and these companies, hopefully, we should make them list at least in India, so that at least the public participation can happen. Okay, that is one. And in terms of know-how, there is no proposal. I don't think we will get any know-how out of this listing proposal, because anyway the MNCs are operating here, we are their employees, and our employees are getting exposed to their, management processes, their, the entire, we know everything how Google functions, right? Because we have employees. So this listing will not enable any additional know-how. It is just participation, nothing else.
Well, friends, out of top 20 internet MNCs, as many as 9 are Chinese, and they have come up in the last 5 or 10 years. And there was a lot of talk here about why there is none from India among the top 20 internet MNCs. And there was also talk about competence of our Bangalore boys. Well, we are fortunate to have with us a person who is most competent to answer this question, the one and only Dr. Vijay Kelkar. So I'm going to request him to respond to that particular question. Dr. Vijay Kelkar.
I think Dr. Zadar, hello. This is one more example of your affection getting sort of better of from your judgment. No, I want to respond to General Tan. I'm sorry, gentleman who raised this issue is not here. He left, seems to be. Is he there?
No, he's there.
Is there?
Yeah, he's there.
No, you see, the internet company which mentioned by Umesh has a very interesting technological characteristics, which he already pointed out, the platform industry. So even Germany, France, UK, Russia have not succeeded. That doesn't mean they're not competent. So non-existence of these firms in India does make no reflection on competence this particular firm, because here first mover has tremendous advantage. And the first mover and large markets gave the US a very large home base, and that really gave them, characters being winners take all, give the head start. So I don't think it reflects any, and there are very number of other indicators one can argue that India should catch up, I agree. But this I will not take as an example of competency, because none of other countries have it. My friend Miraj already mentioned that even high-tech areas, there are examples of space and atomic energy which are high-tech, in which our is competent at par with the rest of the world. So I don't think we can't take the competency argument too far. The central thing I think was Umesh is arguing, that in this interesting world of internet, we are the product. And as a product, we're entitled to have the benefit of those gains which everybody is making. So citizens of India being product, the argument is being made that they should be able to get the upside of this phenomena. And again, he is not making in the outlandish suggestions, being already argued and being done. A number of other countries we himself have mentioned, and his paper gives even more examples. He only covered only a few of them, but he's given many other examples. So it's essentially make equitable sharing of the gains made where trading is taking place. I'm trading my information. I also want fair gain. So, and what he calls make the Indian consumer, who's also contributed to the success. So, because it is another very interesting feature this industry has, what they call network effect, because one more person added network increases the value of the network. So that I'm Indian citizen coming as additional member, I must gain some of that because I'm gaining the earlier holders of the network. So the argument is a bit subtle. It's not a competency. The subtlety is that in network industries, in the platform industries, everybody brings value just being member of the network. And we being 1.2 now? 1.3 billion people, we're enormously bringing the value. There's this question of bargaining and asking return on that value. And the market is not going to give it. So that's why he's asking intervention by the policy, which ensures that the gains are distributed equally and equitably. And it will bring additional investment because they will say it's a fair game. We are not saying which is unusual or unnatural or unreasonable. We have probably woken up a little later. We should have woken up earlier. Umesh was not writing earlier. Umesh would have written it 10 years earlier, probably would have done much earlier. And but I think the demand is not at all unreasonable. It's a essential question of public policy. And what he's saying that Indian, through mechanism which I mentioned, India will become more prosperous through the mechanism which the effects of it lead to more wealth, more income, greater investment, and greater growth. And we may not invent one more Google, but we make Google much better, being a part of the network. So we are also contributing to Google's growth and Google's ability. So I would not take this competence argument too far in this particular context because it's a different ball game we are talking about. I mean, in the other areas, I mean, I don't want to tell you any other metric is well known in terms of competencies concerned or not competency. Both are available. But this is not a competency issue. It's a recognizing the very different nature. There's a new animal in the block, understands the nature of the industry, and what Umesh is crying out that why should we not get value when we contribute value to global network? It's a not unreasonable argument to make. And he's asking change in public policy. So this is what I would respond.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Kelkar. Can I proceed?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Sri Umesh Kudalkar, Prashant Girbane, trustees and members of PIC, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It has been indeed a great pleasure as well as a distinct honor to chair this wonderful function releasing PIC policy paper titled List in India Towards FDI 2.0 by Umesh Kudalkar. At the very outset, I wish to thank Dr. Vijay Kelkar, my favorite ex-boss, for inviting me to chair this discussion. I must also begin by commending Sri Umesh Kudalkar for writing this outstanding policy paper. The presentation was excellent and so was the discussion. I am particularly happy to note that the light to heat ratio in the discussion was indeed unusually good, especially for this audience in Pune. जिथे असं म्हटलं जातं की कमीत कमी शब्दात जास्तीत जास्त अपमान करण्याची क्षमता पुण्यामध्ये आहे, तिथे हीट टू लाईट रेशिओ एवढा चांगला असणं हे निश्चितच अत्यंत कौतुकास्पद आहे. उमेश, I was touched by your reference to आमचा बाप आणि आम्ही. But I hasten to add that I am not a politician at all. There are 12 members selected by the Honorable President of India, and they are given a choice. Either they can join the ruling party or they can stay independent. And I have chosen to remain independent, so I do not belong to. I am a parliamentarian without being a politician, if there is one such thing. There was a question addressed to me, very first question. What will it take for Parliament to move on this issue? And I'm going to come back to that. But let me offer some general comments that I have on this very important issue. The emergence of internet MNCs in the last few years is a game changer for the global economy, and as has been emphasized here, among the top 20 internet leaders, 11 are American and the rest are Chinese, and none of them is from India. And the question that is being asked, and it was resonated here, that India with 130 crore citizens offers a huge web service market, but we have no internet platform. Shri Kudalkar is asking a very valid question. Why should we remain only as passive consumers generating wholesome profits for these MNCs? and he rightly argues for a strategic policy initiative that would enable the passive Indian consumers to become active part owners of these MNCs. In this regard, the policy paper puts forth three different approaches, proposals. First two are straightforward, third one is somewhat involved, but the first one is incentivizing listing of MNCs, MNC subsidiaries through tax benefits. Second one is listing US dollar denominated parent MNC shares on Indian bourses. Both proposals are commendable indeed, and I welcome them wholeheartedly, as you all have done. Kudalkar's argument that global MNCs market value must be equitably distributed across nations in such a way that the value derived out of a particular nation must be available to the investing citizens of that nation. Well, to me it sounds a little bit utopian. In this competitive global economy, who cares about the equitable distribution? I think what we are asking for, this kind of argument has eminent appeal for those who are likely to get a share in the total value, like the Indian citizens. No doubt, आपला फायदा कशात आहे ते लोकांना फार चांगलं कळतं. But by itself, in a static context, why should it have any appeal, any interest to those MNCs who will have to share part of their profits with us? Things, of course, would change dynamically provided certain conditions are met. And to my mind, Kudalkar's argument that listing helps the MNCs gain mind share, that is brand loyalty, customer loyalty in the local markets, and it lowers the cost of capital, is important but is not persuasive enough. On the other hand, providing tax incentives for those listing and implicit tax penalties for those MNCs who are not listing would certainly be persuasive enough. The Indian investors getting to share MNC profits is certainly welcome. It is good, no doubt, but is it good enough? The amounts are large, but I think we all feel that we need to go beyond that, and we should be aiming at having our own internet MNC, which would be in the global top 20. China did it in the last 5 to 10 years. Why can't we? We did not have the first mover advantage, as Dr. Kelkar has very rightly pointed out. And now the policy paper points out, it rightly argues that China adopted coercive methods like banning foreign internet MNCs that, as a democracy, he argues, we would find such bans to be infeasible. But even in my view, even in democracy, what is stopping us from stipulating a quid pro quo policy as China did? For example, stipulating MNCs to transfer technology, to share patents, to enter into mandatory 50-50 joint ventures with the Indian partners if they wish to continue to have market access to 130 crore customers. A serious strategic thought would have to be given to this issue before it is too late. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me now address the question that was raised. There is a related dimension to this issue, which I have been, as Dr. Kelkar mentioned, I have already raised in the parliament a related issue. That issue is a kind of related, what has happened is, these MNCs have become all pervasive as Mr. Kudalkar was saying, and they occupy our day-to-day life. We do not realize that they are making surreptitious aggression into India's financial sector, and that is leading to a very serious national security threat. For example, he talked about, he gave an example about Alibaba owning Paytm. That is just as an example. Just to follow that example, you talked about China, so let me continue with that example. That, you know, in China, as reported in Wall Street Journal, now there is a rule that all Chinese MNCs have to have member on their board from the Chinese Communist Party. That is the first point. Second building block is that Chinese internet MNCs will take over foreign companies. By the way, do you know what is the involvement of foreign companies into China's financial sector? 1.5%. What is the involvement in our country right now? I'm coming to that. So the first building block is Chinese, in that example, is Chinese companies, are having on their board a member of the Chinese Communist Party. Second one, Chinese companies investing in Paytm, for example. This 60% of Paytm is owned by Alibaba. Now, third step is that Indian company like Paytm would apply for a banking license or an NBFC license. Banking license is not possible in India, so NBFC is a good option. Do you know what is the restriction on that? No restrictions. In the automatic route, if foreign direct investment is coming into that sector to NBFC, 100% FDI is allowed, in contrast to 1.5% involvement in China. Now, if they apply and get NBFC license, what would happen? What would happen is that a lot of economic and financial data, as you have mentioned yourself, Umesh, very elegantly, that that big data can be used for profiling and for a number of purposes we can't think about. And big data is really being weaponized, and there are lots of reports that we see. So what would happen is that this would pose a national security threat to us unless we do something about that. So what do we do? Many countries are already doing that, and that also Umesh mentioned. He talked about that committee on CFI-US. They have gone beyond that. That CFI-US is a part. In 6 months back, United States has passed a law. That law, the US Act, is I will give you the title. It is, the abbreviation is FIRRM Act. And that act is basically giving authority to the US government to discriminate between foreign investment. So far, we all believed, including United States, that all foreign direct investment is welcome. More the merrier has been our approach. But now things are changing globally. Particularly, the Americans are stopping some of the Chinese companies. In the recent past, a company called MoneyGram, American company, the permission was denied to Alibaba and Financial. They were trying to buy MoneyGram, and what was the reason? The reasons given publicly were that a lot of economic and financial data would become available to Chinese authorities, and that would pose a national threat to us. This was officially given the reason, and they were denied the permission to buy MoneyGram. And they have come up with this act, FIMMR. And for your information, you raised the issue about what would it take to raise this in the parliament. I am going to do that, but you would be happy to know that an act very similar to the act that US has already passed, the draft has been prepared, and the bill was introduced in the parliament by me as a private member's bill, and I have taken it up with the highest authorities in our country, and the issue is being debated and discussed, and before coming here, when we met earlier, I suggested to Umesh, and there was a question asked whether a presentation of this important subject was made to the Honorable Finance Minister or Mr. Suresh Prabhu. And he said that no, it has not been done. And I promised him that we should discuss this. How do we take this further? And Dr. Vijay Kelkar has already taken initiative to that effect, and whatever it takes to raise this issue in the parliament and at the highest level of the government, I would be not only happy, but I would be more than delighted to pursue that at national level. And the PIC is going to conduct on 26th of March a all-round discussion of various issues which are confronting our country, and this would be, there are 26 papers prepared, 35 papers prepared on a whole range of subjects, and they would be discussed in a conference on 26th of March in New Delhi, and one of them is this one. So this is just a beginning, and I think we should take it further as the new government, whatever it is, comes and is in place. But this is something which needs to be done as early as possible. So I want to thank all of you for asking very, very good questions and making this discussion extremely fruitful. And I certainly want to commend again PIC for having organized and in the great tradition that they have set this discussion on a subject of a great contemporary relevance. Congratulations, Umeshji, and we'll look forward to your further proposals about how do we create one of the top 20 internet MNCs in spite of it being somewhat late. You know, that proposal can come from a think tank like PIC, where you can make a very, very important contribution. Thank you very much.
I just, before Prashant gives the final comments or remarks, because Chairman mentioned about this 26th March meeting, I just want to illustrate. Before 2014 election, national election, PIC brought out a document on, we called it the Re-Innovating India 2014-2019, giving sort of ideas what could be possible policy reforms. We circled all the political parties, and we received a good response that time. Mr. Modi himself wrote he couldn't come, but he nominated somebody to come for a meeting, so did Mrs. Gandhi. All parties came. We invited the new leading thinkers in the press in Delhi. We are doing something similar at 2019 to 24 election. We have prepared a major document consisting of 35 different areas where country can take policy reforms. We invited again all the political parties, all the national political parties. We also invited the think tanks. We also invited the leading sort of public intellectuals who are over in Delhi. Dr. Dada will be there, and then our other member, Kumar Ketkar, who now is also MP, he's also be there. And hopefully, this will be like our last document got reflected in a number of parties' manifestos. Hopefully, this will happen this time also. Some ideas will be reflected, and hopefully that will help us to also lead to some kind of consensus policy reforms. And Umesh's this particular is part of that 35 proposals. We have very good paper on health policy, education policy, urbanization, climate change, environment, energy policy. Now, almost all major sectors have covered, including macroeconomic policies, financial sector reforms, and many others. I can't remember all those 30 of them, but I think we have tried. And each of the paper has been prepared by either our member or member institutions, and really the leading thinker in that area or scholar in that area. So it's based on knowledge and analysis as a very independent sort of input for the policy making. And this is what really the raison d'etre for this our organization is to make independent analysis, independent proposals for the and we'll publish it also. So it will in larger public domain also at some stage for people to continue to fight for those changes.
Hello. Hi, thank you so much, sir. I think I'll just take a minute or two and not more than that. Uh, it's been a great feast, great treat to hear these intellectuals talk about something that's very, very original, something that's very, very refreshing, very, very new thing, something that also makes us in the audience feel why did we not talk about it earlier, right? But great to hear it now and great to see where it's going. So thank you so much to the author. Many, many thanks. Thank you so much, Dr. Jadhav, for agreeing to do this and changing the schedules to make this happen. And of course, to have a presence of Dr. Kelkar adds another layer altogether to any of such interactions. I must also thank all the attendees for those questions that you asked and for the interaction that happened. For all of you, a copy of this policy paper, print copy, is outside. Some of the PIC colleagues would distribute. Some of you would prefer to take it on the web, and that's why it would also be uploaded on the web. And hence it's fine if you just like to do the web thingy. Those who must have a print copy, that's fine, we'll have a print copy outside. I must thank journalist friends, because as I say in PIC programs, it's these friends who take the messages far and wide beyond those who are available, who are here, who are present here today. There is one more thing that we do typically in a vote of thanks. We give a token of appreciation to guest. I looked around, there is no guest. While there is token of appreciation, we just decided to skip it because it will be embarrassing, because who gives whom, I don't know, because all of us are the members of the PIC. We hope to see you again in the PIC programs in near future. There is one coming up on 15th. So look out at the PIC website and the social media. And that's about the capitalism again. So look forward to see some of you there on 15th as well. Thank you so much. Many, many thanks. Give a round of applause to our speakers and we conclude the program. Thank you.
Also, a fresh round of applause for the leadership of Dr. Vijay Kelkar for mentoring public policy issues in such effective manner from Pune.